Look for me in the mountains where walking has a way of pulling you to your peace of mind every day.
Welcome to the Backpacking Light podcast. I'm Andrew Marshall.
And I'm Ryan Jordan.
And the subject of today's podcast is Frameless Pack Best Practices. So, Ryan, you and I have been immersed in studying backpacks for the last few months. And just to give people a really basic primer, I think we could pretty much divide the world of ultralight packs into three categories, which would be external framed, pretty rare at this point, internal framed, probably the most common and popular category of the three, and frameless. So can you give us like kind of it might be self-explanatory, but what's kind of in your head the basic definition of a frameless ultralight pack?
Qualitatively, a frameless pack is just like it sounds. There's no structure to the suspension that gives it stability when it's filled with weight. So the idea with an internal frame is that you've got some type of frame connecting the top of the shoulder straps, or the place where the shoulder straps connect to the backpack, to the place where the hip belt connects to the backpack. And that creates a frame that prevents the torso of the backpack from collapsing. And what happens when you add weight to a backpack is when the torso collapses, you get more weight on your shoulders and it becomes uncomfortable. So I did want to introduce this by sharing a couple slides that folks will be able to see on the video version of the podcast. And this is some work we did a few years ago. And it shows the difference between an internal frame pack and a frameless backpack in terms of its ability to maintain its torso length under load. And so the graph on the left, the blue line is the internal frame pack, the purple line is the frameless backpack, and the red line shows the point at which the torso length of the backpack collapses to less than the torso length of the user in this particular study. And so we see that the internal frame pack does not collapse until it reaches a load of about 45 pounds. And the frameless backpack collapses when you reach a load of about 25 pounds, which is actually pretty high for most frameless packs. And so the idea is that, does this impact comfort? And the graph on the right shows the impact on comfort. So we can see that as a frameless pack starts approaching 15 to 20 pounds, the perception of user comfort starts to go down dramatically. And so there's this romantic idea that a frameless pack is like the epitome of ultralight backpacking.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very appealing. And I've seen people who have, 20, 30, 40 pound kits or the pack weights, and they immediately say, oh, I'm going to go get me a frameless pack that weighs, 10, 12 ounces or 16 ounces. And they load their gear into that, and it's just a sufferfest because, one, their bodies aren't adapted to putting that much stress on the trapezius and shoulders. And two, the backpack it's just not performing at that weight. So that, I think the whole purpose behind this podcast is to identify some ways to mitigate that and help us carry weight in a frameless pack.
Yeah, and it might be useful even to start with just a brief conversation about why someone would even go towards a frameless pack to begin with. I think the impulse is like you mentioned, you're looking at packs that are 12 ounces. It's a great way to shave 6, 7, 8 ounces off of the total weight of your kit. And as we know, the lighter your pack, obviously, the more comfortable you're going to be in some ways throughout the course of the day and your trip. But it's that stress on the shoulders that really starts to add up quickly once you sling that pack on. So what can we do to mitigate? I'm sorry. Let me back up. So what would be a good use case to choose a frameless pack in the first place?
I got another graph that I want to show, and this kind of highlights the range of use cases that are possible with frameless packs. And so here's the same curves that show the point at which this is a variety of frameless packs, all these plots. And so some frameless packs, you start to get collapse of the torso at around 10 pounds. There's one frameless pack on here that doesn't show torso collapse until you get to 30, almost 35 pounds. And so it just shows the wide range of variability that frameless packs have in their ability to maintain structure. And so I think the first part is, how much weight do you want to carry in this thing? And two, what design are you going to go for that helps mitigate some of this? Now, the packs on the high end of the scale typically have some way of integrating a sleeping pad into the frame, either externally on the back side of the backpack or in a compartment that you slide in a folded Z rest or something like that. Those tend to be pretty effective. The other thing to consider here is you've got limits always with the frameless pack. And so for me, the use case is really short trips, light loads, and casual for the casual backpacker. Now, if you're a thru hiker who has the body who's adapted to carrying substantial amounts of weight on your shoulders, your use cases expand. And so you can, if you're carrying 20, 25, maybe even 30 pounds, that might be okay for you, but it's not okay for most people. So for me, a frameless pack is 15 pounds or less. My overnight pack is frameless and my fast packing pack is frameless, but everything else I use is an internal frame pack.
Yeah, and it strikes me that frameless packs might necessitate a little more discipline in terms of packing, because I think if you're dealing with something with a pretty robust internal frame and you want to toss a couple of extra pieces of, like, say you want to toss a chair or a couple of cans of beer or something like that into your pack before you head out, that's not going to make a huge impact on your comfort, whereas with a frameless pack, if you start pushing those upper limits, you're going to feel that really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And that I should caveat my preference for a frameless pack is packs that are small. I don't like large volume frameless packs. Even for winter, when you have, you might have a really light load on an overnighter, but you still have really puffy stuff. What happens is the thing becomes so big, and because there's no structure, if you're going off trail or skiing or snowshoeing, it's still your body's still kind of fighting it. And I prefer an internal frame pack for larger volumes.
Okay, so let's dig into some best practices for frameless packs to mitigate their downsides and to increase their comfort and their usability. So what is just some things right off the top of your head? Easy wins.
The easy win is making sure that your sleeping pad is being used to an advantage that gives the pack some structure. And so a couple of ways to do this: people who use Z-rest will fold that Z-rest into 2 sections that are 3 panels thick and put that right against the back of the backpack, and then pack the gear in front of that. And it does a couple of things. One, it adds structure to the pack. And 2, it prevents the sharp things from kind of poking into your back and creates a nice shaped pack that you can then, pack stuff around in. The second way to do this with a sleeping pad is to roll it in a cylinder inside the backpack and then stuff the gear inside the cylinder. And that creates a kind of a sausage. And so it can be a little bit harder to fight because you're creating this tubular shape that doesn't always mold to your back well. It works better with a foam pad, but if you do it with an inflatable pad, and then you can blow that pad up once your gear is in that cylinder, and that gives it a ton of structure, but it also creates a shape that's kind of not conforming to your body. So that's my number one thing.
Yeah, that second technique can be kind of a pain in the butt. Especially if you're dealing with weather, trying to get in and out of your pack, and it just can get to be a little frustrating. What about packs that I don't know. I don't know if I would describe them as hybrid frameless packs, but I'm thinking of some of the things from Gossamer Gear that come with an integrated pad already built in, and it's actually on the outside of the pack, so that the idea is that you can kind of remove it and use it as a sit pad, as opposed to the other way around where you take something you already have and put it in the pack.
Yeah, I think those are nice because so many of us now have migrated away from foam pads and to inflatable pads, especially something like, the Neo Air style pad. And those just don't work as frame support inside a frameless pack. And so you're typically just packing that in your pack. And so having a pad as a frame sheet or a pseudo frame sheet, and especially one that's external to the pack so that you can use it for something else like a sit pad, that's a nice design feature. And we've seen this from Gossamer Gear since day one on the original packs they made, and they used to fit into these little mesh sleeves, and it was a very slick design. We see this on a couple of cottage makers now, and I think it's a good call.
One of the things that I've been doing lately to give my frameless packs a little structure is I've been using Hyperlite Mountain Gear Pods, which are shaped like the cross section of a backpack. And if you have a stack of those filled with your gear and packed properly, they kind of almost create an internal skeleton almost for your frameless pack. It's kind of an interesting concept.
They do. It works great. It's so much better than cylindrical stuff sacks, which, tend to create this really strange feeling against your back, and because you've got these pressure points and gaps, and they just don't fill the pack volume, so you end up having to stuff like extra clothing into the gaps or things like that, and the pods kind of negate all that, and they work great.
So you've mentioned a few times shoulder adaptation, muscle adaptation. What does that look like in practicality? Is it just starting to use a frameless pack and gradually increasing your miles, or is there a training you can do when you're not backpacking to kind of help you get used to that?
It's such a good question. I have tried to figure out exercises to train shoulders for carrying a frameless pack, and I can't figure it out because there's really nothing that strains. There's no exercise that strains your neck and trapezius in the same way that hanging a backpack off your shoulders does. Mm-hmm. And so I think the best way to do it is to just do it and hike uphill with weight in a frameless pack. Now, for me, this is not fun training. This creates neck pain and back pain, upper back pain that is it's terrible. And so I don't like it. And so for me, I've kind of drawn a hard boundary that I'm not going to carry more than 12 or 15 pounds in a frameless pack anymore. Just I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, I would echo that about there not being much you can do about it. I split a lot of firewood, so I have abnormally developed trap muscles, and it doesn't help. All it does is give me extra meat on my shoulders to get sore. So I think it's just about adapting your nervous system more than it is about building any kind of muscle or putting padding there over your shoulder bones.
Yeah, I'd have to agree.
Any other best practices for frameless packs that come to mind?
Yeah, keep soft stuff against your back, because the day you have that stove or pot, poking against the middle of your back, you have a high tolerance for discomfort. Most people do. And so you end up just hiking with it and suffering with it for way too long because you don't want to get in there and repack your pack. But it starts out in the morning when you're packing up. Just pay attention to where you're putting gear. The other thing with frameless packs as a best practice is because they are so sensitive to torso collapse, you really have to distribute weight appropriately in a frameless pack. And so having a bulbous pack that's thick and then indiscriminately packing high amounts of weight in the back of the pack away from your body, that's going to pull back on your shoulders and can be pretty uncomfortable. So packing a frameless pack requires some discipline if you're packing, anything over, I would say 12 or 15 pounds.
Mm-hmm. Now, I normally think of distributing my pack weight from a vertical standpoint. I don't often think of how my pack weight is distributed on the other axis. And so I'm trying to think of where that would come into play, and I think the thing that comes to mind immediately is water carries. Like if you have a water bladder and you put it in the outside rear external pocket, and it might be pulling you back. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
That's exactly what I'm thinking. Water carries and food, because I keep food in the outside of my pack on an internal frame pack commonly. But on a frameless pack, I will shove my water, usually my bladder, either vertically, very close to the sleeping pad, and then have all the other gear on the outside of that, or lay the bladder flat on top of the pack.
So speaking of vertical weight distribution, Mark Wetherington just raised this point in our recent backpacking trailhead that the conventional wisdom used to be to make sure that you be very disciplined about putting your heavy gear at the bottom and then kind of going up from there. And he made the point that now the kind of practices, people will still generally put their food at the bottom, but it's more about what's the most convenient thing goes at the top. Do you think that applies also to frameless packs, or does it require that sort of conventional wisdom discipline?
It depends on if your frameless pack has a hip belt or not. And if it does, and the hip belt allows you to really cinch that lumbar in, it pays to put weight at the bottom. Otherwise, it matters less. So there's quite a few thru hikers that will pack a frameless pack without a hip belt, or use a frameless pack without a hip belt at all. And in that case, it doesn't matter as much.
I'm trying to think of frameless packs with hip belts. I don't think there's many left at this point. Can you think of a good example?
Well, I know Atom packs, they offer the option, so it's removable. I keep the hip belt on most of my Atom packs. I think it's there. It's there on most packs, but it is an option that people like to remove. And I think this comes from the Ray Jardine days, and the pack that he designed that became the Go Light Breeze. That was a hip beltless pack, and they didn't even offer the option for it. And I used the pack for years, and I love that style. But eventually, as my trips got longer and harder, and I had to pack more stuff, it just became impractical for me.
All right, well, let's wrap it up with some gear recommendations. What are your favorite frameless packs at the moment, your go-tos?
My favorite is an Atom Pax 30. This is my fast packing pack. It has a very light, just 1-inch webbing hip belt on it, and a conventional design that has 2 side pockets, a rear elastic pocket, and then a stash pocket on the bottom of the pack, roll top closure, top strap that I can strap some stuff to the pack, and a bungee system. So lots of external storage options, and nice, robust fabric, and that's my go-to. But again, small size, short trips, when speed and lightweight are the key. How about you?
Well, I want to answer your question, but I also want to dig in a little bit more to what you just said, because to me, what you just described is maybe 80-90% of frameless packs I can think of. So I want to know, what is it about the Atom pack in particular that, because lots of packs have a two pocket system, a roll top closure, single strap, external storage. So what is it about that pack?
I wanted a pack for mountain scrambling and running. And so I had Tom build me a shoulder harness that looked more like an ultra running vest into the pack. And so the primary mechanism that brings the pack into my body are 2 chest straps. I can put a hip belt on it. I rarely do. I just cinch that harness really tightly to my upper body, and it just keeps everything close and stable and allows me to move fast without the pack jostling around. So that's the unique feature of that pack.
Yeah. I have 2 frameless packs that are kind of my go-tos. I have a Mountain Smith Zerk 40, which, again, I think straddles the line between frameless and internal frame. It has a fairly thick foam removable insert that sort of functions as a type of internal frame. And then my Bear's Ears 50 from Nunatak Gear, again, is a similar concept. It's technically frameless, but it definitely has a frame, a foam insert in it, which I never bothered to take out. And so both of those, I guess that's the style that I gravitate towards, is kind of trying to hit a little bit of the best of both worlds.
And what's your weight limit on those two packs?
Probably both of them I push a little bit more than I should. I do have fairly well adapted shoulders and nervous system for pushing the limits of a frameless pack. I'll take the Bear's Ears 50 up to 35 because I'm usually carrying a bear canister with it. It's the pack that I use when I have to carry bear storage. My Mountain Smith Zerk 40, I really try to keep around the 25 mark if I can.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think that we've pretty much covered it. We'll wrap it up. If any listeners have any more questions about frameless pack best practices, please feel free to shoot us an email at podcast@backpackinglight.com.
And we'll go ahead and put some links in the show notes to our new Backpacks Trailhead that'll provide you with some resources. And we just live streamed a members Q&A on the topic of backpacks, design, materials, and use cases, and we'll put a link to that in there as well. And also we'll put a link to the Ultralight Backpacking Bootcamp, our signature online course, because we've just updated the section on backpacks, and that has a video in the course specifically on how to pack a frameless pack.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Backpacking Light podcast. The Backpacking Light podcast is advertising free, thanks to the membership fees paid by Backpacking Light members. A backpackinglight.com membership gives you access to 20 years of archives, forums, and online courses. And don't forget, if you're an unlimited member, you'll get the video version of this podcast for free as a part of your membership. So please consider supporting this podcast and become a member right now at backpackinglight.com/membership.
You can download the show notes for this episode at backpackinglight.com/podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review. It does help other people find the show.
Thanks for listening to the Backpacking Light podcast. I'm Andrew Marshall.
And I'm Ryan Jordan. And if we can leave you with one parting message, it's this: pack less, be more, because lighter is better. Happy trails, everybody.
So I shoulder my backpack, walk away from the car.